Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this afternoon's seminar titled Delivering Innovation Through Alliances and Partnerships, AMP6. If that's not the seminar you're expecting, then perhaps you might consider leaving, but please stay even if it's not the right one you're expecting. Can I just remind people about mobile phones, please, if they've not already switched them into a mode that won't disturb the proceedings. I'd like to start off by introducing Steve Kaye, who is Head of Innovation at Anglian Water. We're going to have 3 presentations, which take about half an hour to start the proceedings, and then there's a good time at the end to have a debate, questions and answers. So if you've got any questions and answers, perhaps you'd just like to keep them back until we finish the 3 presentations. Thank you. Over to you, Steve.
Okay, everybody hear me okay? Okay, thanks Paul. My name's Steve Kaye, I'm Head of Innovation at Anglian Water. I'd like to talk about Anglian Water's approach to innovation and some of the changes in direction that we feel we've made compared to traditional research and development approaches. So if I just take you through the slides, we've got a strategy called Love Every Drop. And it's a long-term view which does actually go beyond the AMP6 period. But it's all about collaborating with other organisations, learning from other industries, doing more innovation beyond the traditional technology innovation. And it's really looking at ourselves alongside other companies in the UK and around the world, not just comparing ourselves to water companies, because I think often as utilities we get trapped in that sort of pack and we don't look beyond. So that's really important to us as well. And ultimately, through that approach, we'll transform our business into something better. So why are we actually taking action? Well, on a kind of large global scale, we feel that Anglian Water has a part to play in the energy challenges, the food challenges, and water. All 3 are becoming more scarce, and we've got challenges around all those in our region. And ultimately, we can influence it from a global perspective on things like climate change by reducing carbon emissions and things like that. But in our region itself, quite small slides these, so I can't actually read them on the screen. Can you hear me now? Hear me okay? Okay, so we're actually in quite a challenging part of the UK. It's the largest geographical area for a water company, so we have to do lots of pumping, so energy is a big issue for us. A lot of our land is below sea level, so we've got rising sea levels and more severe weather, so there might be challenges in future around that. We are the driest region, although you wouldn't believe it after the winter we've just had, but I think that's the point. 2 years ago, we actually issued a hosepipe ban, and more recently, we've got the highest groundwater levels on record, so it's quite interesting, and that'll bring about innovation, I'm sure. We've got lots of homes being built, and the kind of population growth in the region is probably the highest in the country as well. So they're all things that are facing us. So to build on that, we've set ourselves some long-term goals, and there's some sort of key strategic priorities that actually go up to 2035. So the AMP6 period is within that. So we want to be more resilient. We want to find new water resources. That might not just be things like desal, it could be how do we work more with our neighbouring water companies and move water in a more effective way. We want to mitigate the impacts of climate change, etc. And the goals that are in the droplets there, the 10 goals, we've found that they've really changed the way we look at things. And rather than saying we're going to reduce our improve our customer service by 5% or reduce our pollutions by another %, we've gone for real aspirational goals. So we want to say any new asset that we build is 50% less embodied carbon, which is a huge change. No pollutions, no accidents. And by setting aspirational goals, we find it's driven a lot of innovation. So around these challenges, we consulted with our customers, and all the water companies over the last couple of years have been engaging far more with customers. Anglian Water and other companies used to consider themselves as invisible services. We deliberately went down that route. But I think the whole thing's turned around now. So we've engaged with our customers, and oh dear. This is not my presentation. Sorry about this. I'm doing your presentation now. So.
This should be the start of yours.
That's it. Okay. Yep. Thanks. So if you look at the circle in the middle, we've agreed with our customers that these things are important, and the outcomes, the 10 outcomes that are there, we've actually used to develop our business plan for AMP6. And they're effectively measures around, or outcomes around, community, environment, and being a better business. So financial issues and things like that. And this is an example where we've used these outcomes to drive our technology innovation program. Now, around the edge, you've got things like, these are some of the things we'll be looking for from suppliers, from organisations to help us deliver. So we want to build smarter networks that are more proactive, that are real-time, where we understand the real-time issues with them. We want to find new sources of fresh water. We've brought in this concept of water footprint, so we've been very successful in reducing our carbon footprint. So water footprint's the next thing we'll bring in alongside that. Another one that's an interesting one is sewers. Sewers in the past have been quite boring assets, but they're quite interesting to us now because we've done clever things with them, like linking up the models of sewers with Met Office weather data, for example. So we can now start modelling and predicting when some weather comes along, what's the impact on the sewer network, and can we actually do some preparatory work to avoid flooding of homes and flooding of rivers and things like that. So all these things around the edge, and these slides are going to be available, I assume. So you can look at these, and if you've got anything interesting to offer us, then please come and talk to us. This diagram here really summarises our emerging approach to innovation. In the bottom left, we've got what we call our core innovation program. So these are typically programs of work that look at things like new water and wastewater treatment processes, technology-based innovation. And we are very proud of that. And in this AMP period, we feel we're going to deliver over £25 million of benefit, which is quite significant. So we want to keep that. But further to that, we've built this thing called the Water Innovation Network, moving up the graph there. And this is where we've engaged with suppliers and external organisations in an open innovation model to try and leverage innovation from the supply chain. And then the next bit, the engaging our workforce, is, let's not just look outside. We have got people who work for us. We've got 4,000 people. And we're now implementing a crowdsourcing system to engage people around challenge-led innovation. So we want everyone to be recognised for good ideas, but we want to do it in an organised way. And then the last part of the plan, and this is probably a longer term thing, is how we can actually involve our customers directly in innovation. So, we've got 5 million people in the Anglian region, and if we've got an issue around, I don't know, how do you get electricity from algae, or it might be, how do we create better offices? It could be anything. We've got lots of expertise in our region through our customer base. So we feel if we do all that, we will truly be an innovative company, and that is a massive shift away from the conventional central ivory tower kind of R&D teams that we used to be. And I think it's the way the world's changing as well. So those outcomes on that sort of grapefruit shape, we've gone to our capital delivery partners, and we're in the process now of selecting and agreeing who those partners are going to be for AMP6. And as a sort of general point, what the approach we've taken is to present them with these outcomes and say, how can you deliver these with us? And we've had very few questions in number. And it's been a real challenge for these guys to sort of think about that. And because in the past we've asked 1,000 questions and specifically answered each one. So we've kind of turned it around. But what it's brought back is some really good ideas about innovation and doing things differently. So there are benefits, new business opportunities, more collaboration, and it gives suppliers greater visibility as well of our challenges through this open communication. Now put this one in, because I guess we're all trying to get our head around what does TOTEX mean? How, in the old world it was capital expenditure, operational expenditure, and we were regulated on both, and things never really came together. And what we tend to do through that approach is build a lot of assets. Now we're trying to keep customers' bills down to a minimum. We need to take a different approach. So this is a diagram showing an asset management cycle. So in the top left, you've got build new assets. So we're all very familiar with that, building new treatment works and laying pipes. Now as you move round, there's a real need to optimise existing operations. So that's actually getting much more out of our existing processes, etc. And then bottom right, we want to do more maintenance, more proactive maintenance to prevent big costs coming along from time to time. And then the upgrade box on the left is, when you replace a big chunk of a site, for example. But broadly speaking, there's CapEx stuff on the left and OpEx on the right. And I think what we'll see is a shift in the balance. So rather than building, say, a new sewage treatment works, we'll put more innovation into real-time control and understanding of our existing operations, and bring in newer and better processes and put them into our existing assets. So overall, it should cost us less. This is a bit about engaging our workforce, and we're actually doing this through crowdsourcing. How am I doing for time? 2 minutes. Okay. Crowdsourcing is an approach where basically we engage the crowd. So rather than taking ideas from organisations or our own people, we're having an internet-based system, a bit like YouTube, where ideas will come in and the crowd will actually vote things to the top. So we call that gamification, and we're going to try and develop a system for us to change our culture as much as anything. Innovation through the supply chain, we've created this thing called the Water Innovation Network, which is a partnership with a local organisation called Opportunity Peterborough. And basically this process tells you how it works. So we take ideas from companies. We're not actually doing this through crowdsourcing. This is quite an old approach. But we take new ideas and we push them through a steering group into experts in the organisation. And the real key to success for this is that we do follow up with every organisation that puts an idea in, if it works or it doesn't. And then the other side of this is we do run events around Anglian Water's challenges. I think companies that are open about their challenges are more likely to get better collaboration with organisations. So, I'll just be one more minute. I mentioned at the start we had a target of reducing our embodied carbon on new assets by 50%. But when we first put that in, people said to us, well, it'll cost you more money. You'll have to use exotic materials and things like that. What we found is that we've actually reduced cost as well as reducing carbon. And the dots in the top right-hand box there are the projects that have both reduced costs and reduced embodied carbon. So in AMP5, we've actually reduced our embodied carbon by over 40%, so we're well on the way to meeting that target. But the astounding thing is that we've actually saved money as well, significant money, by looking at different construction methods, using waste on site, not using on-site concrete and things like that. So by having this aspirational target, it has changed our thinking quite significantly. So I'll just do the last knocked it up again. So I think in conclusion, how do we innovate in a Totex world? So I've tried to explain what I think Totex is all about. So how can companies help us do that? How can we enhance our existing assets more through innovation? Introducing water footprint, we are still learning about that, and we want to make it more meaningful. Aspirational goals, we feel we need those to drive innovation in the company. And building long-term relationships. Our alliances now are 15 years, not 5 years, which has again brought new thinking. And absolutely key, learning from other industries. The power industry, food and agriculture. There are loads of other industries where we feel innovation is transferable from one to the other. And as a last point, I think a shift towards open innovation rather than trying to do it all yourselves is the way forward. So, sorry I overrun. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Steve. Our next speaker is Keith Wishart, who's Head of Technology and Innovation at 820, which is Thames Water's Alliance for AMP6 and beyond.
Okay, thanks very much, Paul. Thanks, Steve. Right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Keith Wishart. I'm Head of Innovation, Sustainability and Collaboration at 820. It might be an organisational name that you're not familiar with, so I'm going to introduce who we are and what we do in a minute. Also point out I'm a technology innovation consultant from IBM, so I'll explain how that works to you in a minute. But if I was going to give you one key message from this talk, and then you can kind of fall asleep for the next 10 minutes, is although the organisation I come from is highly driven by technology and technology-based innovation, what we see as being the real key innovation for what we're going to do over AMP6 is really collaboration, and it's the way we work together that's going to be radically different to what's ever been done before. So I'll introduce the organisation in a second. What I want to do just first of all is really just remind everyone about why I think innovation and collaboration are fundamentally important for what we're going to do in the next AMP period. So what's changing for all of us in the industry, excuse me, is the shift towards customer outcomes and an outcomes-based way of thinking. So it doesn't matter so much what we do, it matters what we deliver, and how we get to there can be achieved through a number of different routes. And for us, what that changes in 820 is that we're going to do a number of things fundamentally different. We're going to innovate differently, we're going to take a different approach to sustainability, and importantly, we're going to collaborate in a completely different way. So as Head of Innovation, Sustainability and Collaboration, there's quite a lot resting on my shoulders over the next few years. So let me tell you who 820 actually are. We're the supply chain alliance for Thames Water for the next AMP period and potentially for the AMP period beyond that. So we're 8 organisations, including Thames, so you can read the names there off the screen for yourself. And what's really important here is about bringing these organisations together is not about just as simple as bringing the best of Balfour Beatty or the best of Atkins or the best of Veolia. It's fundamentally, when we bring these organisations together, we want to create something that is completely new, that could not actually have been done individually by any one of those organisations. And IBM, my home organisation, has a very specific role in that, because we're what's called the technology and innovation partner. And when we talk about technology, it's not just about the IBM type of things that you might think about IS and data and systems. It's about all the technology that's required across the Alliance to drive innovation and performance in the next period. So it could be innovations around supply chain, it could be innovations around procurement, it could be process innovation. So we're innovating much more broadly than we've ever done before, and we're trying to get a much different approach to the types of behaviours that we're doing within the Alliance. So we want to have things like an academy for people that we bring into the Alliance. So it's not just a onboarding and here's your badge and here's your job and what you go. The academy is about bringing people on board and changing the way they think about the capital programme, and fundamentally getting some of the key outcomes, the customer outcomes, embedded in the way in our ways of working. So to do that, we really need collaboration. So let me just talk a little bit about what our point of view is on collaboration. I said collaboration is the key innovation that we're going to deliver in the 820 Alliance. There's a bit of research here from the boffins at IBM, big global study of chief executives, and what they're saying is the message is very, very simple from this slide, is the direction of travel for collaboration is heading in one direction, i.e. it's getting much, much deeper. So organisations are collaborating much more with their customers, with their partners, the suppliers, and with their employees. Steve very much touching on some of that in terms of the things like the crowdsourcing, the innovation with customers. And today, whereas around half of organisations are thinking about these concepts or starting to get their heads around it, in around 3 to 5 years' time, virtually all organisations will be much, much more collaborative with their customers, with their partners, with the supply chain. So for us, that drives us to two behaviours in 820. The first is around biodiversity of the team. So if you come into one of the offices that we work out in Thames Water, what you don't see is a bunch of Veolia people doing process innovation and CHP and stuff like that, and you don't see a bunch of Skanska people doing construction techniques, and you don't see a bunch of people going pour concrete in the ground, and a bunch of IBMers sitting in the corner wondering what on earth they've walked into. There's a much, much more diverse group of people coming together. So you take your home company badge off, it goes away for 5 years, and in my team, although it is predominantly around innovation, and there's a reasonable amount of folk from my home organisation. I have people from Veolia, I have people from MWH, I have people of Thames Water that report into me and that I effectively manage. So it's the skills that we bring together that create something that is greater than the individual sums of the parts. The second point around that is the role of Thames themselves. So the model of collaboration that we've got in the Alliance creates us working towards a certain outcome of which Thames are an equal partner with the Alliance partners. So we're going to share the risk and reward in this. And what that means is Thames actually aren't the client, they're a partner in the organisation. So we're all equally invested in this enterprise. And if, for example, the best people to drive a decision in 820 is someone from Skanska and someone from Balfour Beatty, they go on and do that, and they lead, and we trust them to do that. We don't go back and we say, what does the client want? What does the client want? We are the client in this organisation ourselves. And actually, the customer is the person who turns on the tap and flushes the loo. That's the customer that we all need to think about. So it all sounds great. Bed of roses, well, it's not actually. We're at the very, very start of a journey. I'd be lying to you if I said this wasn't an extremely challenging thing that we're taking on. So we're not pretending it's easy. It's a much harder form of collaboration because each of us comes from a home organisation where we've got certain, like even our home lives, we've got certain home comforts, we've got certain things we like doing, we've got ways of working. We have to forget about all of that, and we have to move to something that is different from all of that and adapt the behaviours that we want to drive as an alliance. So that presents some challenges, individually and organisationally. We're at different points in that journey to collaborative innovation. I don't think any of the organisations or any of the individuals in the Alliance are up in the top right box, but this is the approach we're going to take. So we're trying to make the innovation much more broad in terms of bringing in expertise from all the partners and beyond, and the supply chain, and other industries, and our customers, and frankly, anyone who's got a good idea. And we're trying to take the collaboration much, much deeper as well. So that's what I mean when I say collaboration really is the key to innovation. So to get us moving, we agreed some principles around collaboration. This was to give us stuff that we could agree on and inspire us to think and act. So if you look at what the theme of those is, it's very much about working together and joined up. So things, the words that should be jumping out to you there are, multidisciplinary, reuse of existing systems, open, provocative kind of culture. And we used those to effectively create, there are 10 of these areas. I'm only going to represent a few that we're going to drive forward in the programme in terms of innovation or efficiency areas. So we've collectively brought these together, and what we see here is not that one of those is, it says data analytics. That's, IBM will go and do that. Well, no, IBM won't go and do that. The Alliance will do that, and it might be bits of one organisation, and it might be bits of another. So we're going to look at how we drive information out of data. We're going to become much more standardised in the way we approach things, so looking at things like signature design, so not going around and fixing bits of kits individually, doing stuff that is much more repeatable. That's a more sustainable approach. We're looking at technology and tools such as BIM, building information modelling, and that's not just a bit of shiny 3D technology. That's fundamentally about collaboration, because it's about people in the high-level design passing the same piece of information down through into detailed design to whoever goes on and constructs that asset, to whoever goes on, owns that asset, maintains it, repairs it, requires the parts for it. So it's a bit of technology that's fundamental to collaboration. 2 minutes, that's good, because I think we're probably getting through most of these. So, just to give you a kind of practical example of some of the things that we have started to work on, one of the biggest innovations that we think we'll do is actually identifying where we don't need to do something. So the Alliance, the 8.2 Alliance has a programme of around about £2 billion worth of work to deliver, but actually we can achieve a lot of the customer outcomes without necessarily doing all of that. So some of the data analytics work has, for example, shown where we don't need to do sort of major replacement of pumps and the like, because we can get a better understanding of asset performance, and if we have a much more proactive maintenance regime, then actually we can take whole chunks of the replacement out of that programme, but we still deliver our customer outcome, because they'll still get the reliability and the serviceability from the water supply that they require. So clearly no one organisation can deliver all of these, so it's about bringing together the partner organisations to achieve these outcomes. So that's us. We're still at the very early stage. The Alliance started early, so we started last May. If you think of this kind of storming, norming, performing, we're right at the early stages of this. The aim is to run not just for AMP6, but potentially onto AMP7 as well. But because we started early, we've started doing things that traditionally would have been done more by, in the case of Thames Water, Thames asset management teams themselves. So we're operating at much higher up the value curve, which gives us an opportunity to influence and change the direction in terms of where we're setting off. And in the spirit of true collaboration, I thought this was a terrible idea, but my colleagues persuaded me otherwise, so I am collaborating with them. But the message here was, Christopher Columbus said, you've got to have courage to set off and lose sight of the shore. You might not know exactly where your destination is, but if at some point you don't see the beach and the shoreline behind you disappear, you're never going to get where you want to go in that journey. So that's where we are. We've got everyone on board the ship. We've just gone off. We've seen our home company shorelines disappear. We're not panicking wildly, but we're a little bit apprehensive about where we're going, and we're very pleased to meet all of you in the audience as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Keith. Our next speaker is Malcolm Horne, who's Asset Creation General Manager for Severn Trent Water.
Thank you, Paul. Good afternoon. So my name is Malcolm Horne, General Manager at Severn Trent. We spent about £2 billion of capital investment this AMP, and I have the lucky job of looking after about a quarter of it. So there's 4 of us who look after a work stream each: water, waste, infra, non-infra. And today's described as a debate, so I think my job is to try to tee up some ideas, some of the ingredients which go into stimulating innovation and then actually making that come real through delivery. So what I was going to try and do is explore how the landscape is changing. There's some real shifts coming in as we go into AMP6, quite fundamental shifts for the industry, which I think are really exciting. So I want to point to some of those, because I think they will change how we work and change, therefore, what we're looking for. I want to also share about some of this is real, so we're doing a lot of this today, and some of those building blocks we have, and then how that's going to go into AMP6. And there's a whole mix here of some high-level stuff and some detail, and you can choose which is most of interest. Here's some stats. So yes, we are Severn Trent. Lots of significant assets, infrastructure we have to look after. But as the previous speakers have said, what's also important here are the outcomes. Delivering lowest charges that we have in the country today for our customers, delivering lowest per capita consumption, halving serious pollutions, frontier flooding performance, 30% renewables generation, and probably for today what's quite key is around greater than 20% efficiency on our capital delivery this AMP. So the outcomes of this are fundamental. Then we want to talk about some of the ingredients. So I said the landscape is changing, and I think it's really exciting. So we've been pushing as an industry for flexibility, for risk reward, and that is coming. And our challenge then is to embrace that and respond to that. I think we'd like to think as water companies that we are customer focused, and in essence I think we do an awful lot which is good and customer focused, but is that really coming front and centre? A lot of you will have heard a willingness to pay, so we've surveyed a large cross sections of our customers. We did it for PR09, we've done it even more thoroughly for going into AMP6 for PR14, and what that takes you into then is what Ofwat are doing is challenging us effectively by dropping our guaranteed rate of return, and that's the ongoing discussions that are happening at the moment, and pushing us then to earn that gap by outperformance. And that is exciting, and there's still a lot to play out there, but what that means is for us involved in delivering our operational performance and our delivery as a business, for those of you involved in that supply chain, does that performance get more and more critical. What's then interesting is that what we'll be doing is linking the outcomes we deliver to financial returns. Very, and potentially exciting rewards and potentially worrying levels of risks if we don't deliver the performance. That will definitely sharpen focus, and it'll be interesting how much or how each company reflects that into their supply chain. So it's certainly something I'm looking at with my supply chain. And then talk, others have mentioned TOTEX. In essence, that's going to talk to efficiency, outperformance, and whether it's capital delivery, operational delivery, as a bunch. So I was going to point a little bit to some things we're doing today. So when we went into AMP5 as Severn Trent, we moved to a new model. And these are some of the things that we set value in moving to that new model. Very much a joint one supply chain delivery. Moving to a design and build model. So we in Severn Trent retained an expert client, so we understand the risks, we look at the front end of what we need as a business, make sure it works operationally, but then we hand it to our D&B partners for delivery end to end. We've focused our contractor base, and the more you try to alliance, effectively it's easier to work with the fewer entities, but what's then been critical is them getting stability in their supply chains and how that works. And you'll see members of their supply chains co-located in our offices as well, so it's very much run as an entity. The expert clients just talked about, so we chose to retain expertise in-house so we understand what we're investing in and how it fits with our needs. Roller coaster, I'm not sure we really cracked that going into AMP5, but I'm pleased we have now going into AMP6. So our contractor said it's worth X to us if you don't turn the work off and turn it back on again. So it's taken extra investment for us to pull investment forward, but we've not been able to keep all of our teams going, which is great. Standards and specs, so it's a real challenge. When you get innovation, you've got to lock it in somehow and get it delivered everywhere. So a lot of focus on that. Technology, again, a challenge. Common platforms. It'd be interesting to debate how you see that working. It's a real challenge getting common platforms across a lot of different entities. We've done reasonable on that. I think there's more to do on that. So a bit about how we're set up. We run on a geographical basis and also on a workstream basis. You can see some of the names on there who we work with. So we've got 6 of the large contractors who are co-located in our offices. And then across our operational areas, we also pull on a couple of others, Kaye and Morrison. So there's probably 8 large entities who deliver the vast majority of our investment. But so what is absolutely key is what sits behind them within their supply chains as well. And more they are co-located with us. For those interested, our commercial strategy, and again, I think you'll probably hear come out in the debate, you need a mix of a lot of these things. No one of these is the panacea. So we've got a mix of a very steady framework arrangement. We will pull as much work through that as we can to keep that spiced up. We'll also have some competitive tender. We'll do some collaborative alliancing. So I think Steve pointed to like a major projects element within Anglian. We ended up putting that through our main frameworks, but we did a special deal and a wrapper around that with them. So we kept the continuity of suppliers, but we had a special commercial arrangement, and we learned quite a lot through that. And a lot of that's informed our AMP6 thinking. And then there's other ways we can pull in other support. I'm not going to go into all the detail on this, but I think it's important to say you've got to have that structure that sits behind how you deliver all of this. What this has delivered for us within AMP5, I'd say, is a lot of cost certainty. And it might come out in the debate. How you actually incentivise innovation is quite interesting. So something we're looking as we evolve into AMP6 is how do we perhaps shift some of that risk and reward share with our supply chain. That'll be interesting. And again, how we drive delivery. So we have a lot of comparative metrics, and we have things like comm cells in Severn, Trent, where we try to get everybody around the table together to understand relative performance, how they're bringing in ideas, and to share that and work through challenges. I want to talk about seek and share. So again, how do you share knowledge across very big organisations, and especially when you split out into supply chains as well? So we have a framework for what's called seeking and sharing. So people can go and seek knowledge through things called wise rooms, we call them. So you can have interest groups within the company. And we then bring experts together to work on what we call communities of practice along specialist areas. And then the trick is how we then engage our supply chain to engage with those ideas and share expertise. But it works pretty well. And once they get going, there's always an inertia to these things. But once people start getting something back, it drives an awful lot of information sharing. That's been pretty successful. Pointing to some successes, again, a lot of this is all about delivering outcomes at the end of the day. So we can point to where we've taken innovation that's been quite embryonic and brought it to bear across big capital programs. And how we do that is we've also got an R&D framework, an innovation framework, which are great at pulling out into the marketplace. So whilst we might have big entities for delivery, we recognise you need a lot of the smaller niche organisations who've got the ideas, and how do you hook that in? So they've got this thing we call like an ideas pool. So we work with universities, we'll work with entrepreneurs, small innovative businesses, and they will go around the country and internationally looking at how you pull these things in. They'll obviously do some filtering and then look for, well, how do we bring that to bear? Do we run pilots? And we've got a number now which are at scale in the company, which are certainly some firsts for Severn Trent. We've got firsts for UK. I'm not sure how many we've got first globally, but certainly we're pulling a lot of firsts for UK in through this, which is exciting. And then staring into AMP6, there's always a balance around waiting for the optimal solution to everything versus getting things going. And I'm sure we're all familiar with that tension. But we recognise that we've got some very stretching consents coming in as part of the Water Framework Directive, significant investment attached to that. So what we've done is we've sifted the top 6 technologies around P removal, so phosphorus removal. Today that tends to be sort of iron dosing and things like that, which is quite intensive. We've got loads of some sort of wacky ideas and some that look a bit more credible, filtered them down, so we've now got a scale plant that we can now run these through real environment at a reasonable scale, test them, and the ones we like best then we'll put into our full-scale production and embrace it. Another way of getting innovation is what all supply chain will say is, well, give us visibility of the work, we just see what you've got so you can work with it. And then that drives lots of things like procurement, the ability to scale innovation, the ability for our supply chain to batch work. So we put a lot of work into trying to get all of our AMP6 program at least on the table so people can have a look at it. How many screens do we need? How many new CHP plants? How many new pumping stations we're going to actually renovate over the period? Right, now let's go and step into each of those. Last thing I'm going to touch on then is sort of process optimization. So some we're looking at a lot, and I'm sure others may well, around sort of factory thinking. And you can look at manufacturing and you see the military precision around which they operate, and how well do we operate, particularly in a construction sector, with that military precision. We put up, I think, with a lot of waste and a lot of rework as an industry. So there'll be quite a bit of focus coming through around how do you get really slick right through an end-to-end process out onto sites, pre-production, productization and so on. And a really exciting area, I think, for the industry. And that was me, really. So I think what's interesting for a day like today is, we're open for ideas. An environment like this, we've got a vehicle then that you can actually get those ideas into production. Do come forward with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. Can I just ask for the audience, how many people here work for water companies? Let's have a show of hands, please. Thank you. How many work for companies in the supply chain? And are there any others, regulators or other people here at all? 2. Thank you. Thank you very much. Has anybody got any burning questions for any one of our speakers leading from their presentations? Yes. We have a roving mic. So could you just identify yourself, please, before you ask a question?
Yeah, hello there. My name's Carl Smith. I'm from Brammer UK Limited. We're primarily an engineering distributor solutions provider, primarily in the OPEX environment. One question I had for everyone really was we have quite a strong value proposition that we provide throughout UK manufacturing and into the utility sector. We often struggle in the water industry to get engagement at a local level, whereas interesting to hear your messages today. Totally agree with those. There's lots of innovation we can bring, but it's just your thoughts on how you drive that message deeper into your organisation so it's easier for us to engage.
Steve?
Is it Carl? Yeah, good question. The way we've tried to do it is through our Water Innovation Network. We found that traditionally we set up big frameworks and we have supply chain kind of procedures, and often they can block out smaller, more innovative, newer businesses. So our Water Innovation Network was intended to make contact with companies with new ideas that we might not have worked with before. But we've got a process there that, on one hand, presents our challenges very clearly, but on the other, we've got a quite elegant process for bringing ideas back in. And we do work very closely with our supply chain team in making sure we're not treading on any toes, etc. And sometimes we can link those to bigger tier contractors. So, on balance, it's started to work, and we feel organisations are starting to come in more frequently.
Thank you. Malcolm?
Yeah, I wouldn't envy you trying to come in at a local level. I think it'd be really difficult. So I would point you towards the likes of the innovation team that I described as a channel, or I'd point you to the major suppliers in the supply chain, those 8 who I would like to think would be interested in adopting good ideas that they saw to focus that entry.
Thank you. Any other questions specifically? Or generally, opening it up further?
My name's Rob Monroe, Innovation Coach, and I'm intrigued by the partnership models that you've got and the tension that might exist between commercial drives in partner organisations and the need to innovate. And the root of innovation is creation of ideas and bringing different worlds together, if you like. So, have you got any thoughts about how you intend to manage that tension to make the ideas flow for the value of the consortium?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of a number of tensions actually that kind of come out in the innovation process, and the approach that we're taking is to think about innovation coming from quite a broad range of sources. It's not, you've got near-term type stuff, you've got stuff that you can easily apply that's been done in other industries, and you've got stuff that you've got to take a bit of a more of a long-term kind of bet on. And the model that we've developed is one where, depending on what the innovation is, there are a number of different channels or routes through which it would go through the organisation, by which I really mean kind of wider TEMS. So some of it might be best suited to go through the delivery organisation through 820 because of the commercial imperatives, and they'll drive that in a certain direction. But also the other routes. So there's obviously a innovation team within TEMS that looks at slightly longer term aspects. We'll do more stuff around kind of pilots, on-site trials, and maybe some research aspects to that. And then there's also actually opportunity to say, not all the innovation is going to be done by those organisations. A lot of innovation is going to be pushed out to the supply community, and I think community is quite an important term here to actually just touch on the earlier point around that Carl was making about the difficulty of engagement. Is if we kind of break this structure of it being kind of this hierarchical chain and have more of the kind of the communities of practice, which Malcolm was certainly talking about, then one route to innovation is not what is it we need to do, it's let's articulate our problems to the marketplace and let them solve it. And there'll be a whole range of different commercial mechanisms will come into play there.
Yeah, I'd agree with all that, but look at it from a different angle. We've created this concept called a shop window, and we've picked a kind of an area to pull things together. And the principle there is that we will see synergies between different innovative solutions. So we're trying to create a window to the future and prove not just single innovations, but innovations in more collective sense. And then if we can prove the benefits in that area, then it will make it easier to create business cases and roll them out. But we are in early stages of that, but I think it's a kind of a good build on everything Keith said.
Any other questions at all? Yep, thank you.
Mullord, Pick Everard. Just a quick question in terms of, I have seen sort of the changing in the ways that working collaboratively has actually helped and really benefited and brought change and made really sort of improve the speed at which delivery has happened on a number of projects. But one thing I find is we don't have a forum normally for communicating problems. Now, innovations is a great way, but often we don't know the problems on the ground. When people come in with the problems they got on the ground, then we can find solutions. So is there any sort of mechanism within your sort of organisations for recording problems at all levels, from like service delivery, from clients and capital projects?
So I pointed in my presentation to the Seek and Share initiative, which was to try to get into what you're describing, so people can seek solutions to problems. And we found the way into our operational colleagues actually was we got that going through a safety forums, because that was something they were very passionate about. So, and they had quite a good network of safety improvement teams, but locally. What they hadn't got was how they communicated across geography. So we got that working because they were really excited to get safety ideas. They had energy for that. And then that got them engaged. Then actually, I've also got this problem with pumps. Oh, this panel's rubbish. This contractor hasn't finished this off, whatever it might be. That could then trigger, or this thing keeps happening to me. Does it happen to anybody else? So that pull we felt is vital. Otherwise, just pushing all the time.
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly looking at a number of things that have been touched on today around kind of knowledge sharing and kind of tools for collaboration, and where you kind of stick a kind of a problem or a query in a way that's very, very easy for people to access and use, very simple. But the more important thing I put into that is we're trying to find not just the problems, but the problems people don't know that they have. And the way of going about that is within the innovation process that we're defining. It's all very positive because people will throw in, I've got an idea for this, I've got a solution for this, so you get all the positive stuff coming in. But effectively what you kind of build up is a heat map which tells you all the areas you're solving, but equally that's actually telling you the areas in your program and the outcomes you're driving towards that you're not solving. So equally as part of the management of that process is not just about taking in the great ideas, it's about pulling out the areas of the unresolved problems and actually pushing them out and saying no one is talking about this area or how we're going to drive performance in these assets or in these treatment works or whatever it is. So I see that very much as the role of the process to articulate back out what these unresolved problems are.
Yeah, I think that just to sort of build on that, the crowdsourcing approach for me is the way forward, because there is a risk with what you're implying that you end up with so many problems you can't. Which would you pick? Which do you prioritise? So I think there's a real skill in picking the real important problems and then managing feedback around those, where in the past we had for example, a suggestion scheme where anything came in and it was such an unwieldy task to manage everything. So we've kind of tried to turn that around and say what are the most important challenges and keep it more focused.
Thank you. Anybody else? We've got time for one or two more questions probably. Thank you.
Hi there, Sam Marshall from Severn Trent Water. A question probably specifically for the chap from 820. So about a year ago, we went into an alliance with Morrison Utility Services for our water distribution repair and maintenance contract. So similar approach to yourself in terms of integrated management structures, reporting lines crossed over, leaving your badges at the door, that sort of stuff. I just wanted to understand how you approach the cultural element of that work. So we had a cultural work stream that we tried to sort of look at embedding and sustaining the change. I think it's fair to say that there were some successes there, but we're still facing some challenges a year into the alliance. So just wanted to understand your views on that.
So I mean, it's early days for us. So I think what we've tried to do, as well as having some principles around the innovation areas that I talked about, we've also established kind of a series of sort of key behaviours, which are very, very similar. They're around openness, they're around trust, they're around leadership, they're around empowerment. They're not anything that you wouldn't anticipate. But the main vehicle that we're trying to build to address that is going to be through an academy structure in terms of how we onboard people. And onboarding is not really the right term, I think, for what we're trying to do, because we're trying to bring people into the organisation and make them aware of what's different and what's changing and the values, rather than just come in and here's your badge and this is your job. So I think we should probably talk, because I think the issue, you're a year further down the line than us, so you're probably starting to see some of these challenges emerge practically that we're going to hit pretty quick as we start to ramping up to quite some serious numbers of people getting involved in this.
Any more questions at all? I've got one, because Malcolm, in your presentation, you showed that you were you selected some water companies as being partners to collaborate with. I'm keen to try and see some commonality across the water companies, rather than 10 different solutions or 20 different solutions to the same problem. Could you perhaps talk about what's happening in your worlds about that, to make it happen?
I'll start if you like. I think for me, in the past we were deemed to be, well, we are in competition on one hand, but I think for me the front end, the creative idea, the innovation, coming up with some new knowledge is it in one respect the easy bit. I think the way you have to implement that, the challenges involved in implementing that into your own business are really difficult in our regulated business. So for me, the more open we can be together about new ideas, the better. And then it's down to each company then to implement it. So I think the industry will be better overall by taking that approach. And I think we do that. We work with Severn Trent, we work with most of the water companies. But I think we need to get better at sharing out the resource somehow, and things like pilots, so it's sharing them around more and spreading the load. And I think we're all starting to see it that way.
Yeah, I mean, obviously people will be familiar probably with UK Wear and other vehicles that we use to drive that collaboration. I think the reality also we're quite different personalities as companies, which means we'll tend to come together for different things. It's probably unlikely we'll come together as all 10 or all 21, 22 for everything, which is why you saw different names on there. Will be certain things that we're trying to drive that's of interest to a number of us. You know, we've got different histories, we'll be at different stages of our investment in different asset types or something, so our needs will inherently be different. So you'll tend to find a few of us will come together for specific needs.
Thank you. Has anybody else got any last comments or very final questions?
Just this one down here.
One here at the front. Excuse me. Sorry, can't hear you.
The mic.
Working. It's a quick question on drinking water quality, specifically with metaldehyde compliance. So what are water companies doing towards meeting this regulation? Metaldehyde is a problem for them.
Metaldehyde compliance. Sounds like quite a deep question.
I didn't quite hear your question. Is it about metaldehyde?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we're taking a sort of two-pronged attack that we try and develop technologies to remove it. But we feel more importantly, the answers lies in catchment management and stakeholder management. So if we can influence manufacturers of pesticides, if we can influence farmers to do different things, overall it may end up costing us a lot less money. But we need to look at treatment as well. And I mean, we've done some work ourselves on using UV and peroxide to do that. But it tends to be expensive and, you know, you've got management of the process issues, things like that.
Thank you. Well, I think we've used up our time. Slight liberty from me. British Water at IWEX this year is launching BWise, which is the British Water Innovation Search Engine. We're on stand B54, so if you want to find out more about it, please come along. Finally, I'll just thank our speakers. Thank you.